We're going to move on now and look at the way that digital can really make an impact when it comes to, making, real social good. And I'd like to ask Karl Wilding to step up. We've got Karl, excellent. And he's just going to talk to us for a few minutes around the issues which are affecting the VCS sector. Excellent. And I'll stay here so I'm not too distracting, but I'm going to stay on the stage. Save me bobbing around.
I'm just going to put my timer on. 10 minutes is, I was told, or is that? Yeah, okay. Hello everyone, I'm Karl. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about tech, and as I see it in relation to charities, and then probably say a few words around challenges in terms of voluntary organisations. So trying to help you think a little bit about the road ahead, as we would describe it. I don't know if this picture has become a cliche or not. Have you seen this today yet? Does anyone know what it is? It's the papal inauguration in 2005 and in 2013. Okay, digital is changing everything. You read every day about what's happening in other sectors, in the business sector and so on. I don't think charities in the voluntary sector are any different in terms of how digital is changing our operating models and our business models. And it strikes me that some organisations are dealing with that well, and some organisations are dealing with that less well. There's a bit of heads in the sand in a few places, as well as some really good leading edge stuff. We tend to think that lots of sort of digital and sort of and tech as applied to social good is actually sort of new, and in doing so, I think a lot of the time we come across members all the time that worry that this stuff is new and it's different and they don't know how to do it and so on. It's not actually. If you actually look at some of the principles that digital is augmenting, some of the practices and behaviours, this stuff has been around for years and years. It's been around since the inception of the voluntary sector. So this is the Rotary International. I'm told all the time about how digital is really important in terms of scaling up and helping scale new ideas. Well, Rotary has scaled up a fantastic idea to become a global phenomenon, as have the Scouts, as have the Cubs. So my second sort of thing about digital is don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. How can digital help, whether it's grassroots organisations or bigger charities, to make that lasting social good that I think we're all interested in? Well, if you think about what the roles of organisations are, there are probably about generically 4 or 5 roles that essentially most voluntary organisations of some description or other fulfil. And one of the first is that they spot social problems and then they find ways of leveraging resources to apply to those social problems. People still trust voluntary organisations and charities more than they are likely to trust the state or indeed business when they see a social problem and they want to do something about it, such as give their money. Again, I sort of stick with what I said about social networks before, but what's changing at the minute is that the way that people want to do good is changing in our society, and this is a fundamental challenge for us. The way that people want to give their time and give their money is changing. So this is an advert for a charity or a charity website called Lend With Care. My wife Panic bought me a gorilla onesie. I wish she'd bought me a Lend With Care gift voucher instead. I say that because the way that people are choosing to support organisations is changing, and instead of just giving money, they're more interested in lending money. Has anyone come across Kiva? K-I-V-A? If you haven't, have a look at Kiva, which is as big as any social finance institution that you will come across, and it's a microfinance institution where people are blending, not just giving to Kiva, who then lend the money, but they're blending it with loaning money instead, and it's part of that changing world that we're in. Does anybody know whose lunch this is? No? It's yours.
It's in my presentation as well.
Is it? Ah! Do you want me to skip this then?
It's fine, you can have it. I'll delete it.
We'll fight afterwards. This is the lunch of a schoolgirl called Martha Payne. Okay? And this is her school lunch. And every day, Martha Payne took a photograph of her school lunch. Would you like to eat that for your lunch? Yeah, I wouldn't either. The school actually banned her from ultimately blogging and taking photographs of her school lunch. And Martha Payne ultimately, by campaigning, and this is my second issue that in terms of what's the role of grassroots organisations, Martha Payne essentially ultimately got the local authority to change the school lunch. Okay. Now, again, I'm often told by NCVO's members that, oh, well, we don't have the time, we don't have the resources to do digital, you know what I mean, it's for someone else, we can't do it. Martha Payne's just a schoolgirl, and Martha Payne's website has had 10 million hits. Okay? Never ever let anybody tell you that you cannot do it, because you can. Yeah? What's that fantastic quote from Margaret Mead? Yes. Do it for me. Never underestimate that a small group of people can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever did. So if Martha Payne can do it, you can do it. Okay. We don't just leverage money, we don't just campaign, we also leverage people's time and money and so on. A few years ago, I used to use a picture all the time of an organisation called Calsa Aid, if you've come across Calsa Aid, who normally do disaster relief work in places like Haiti and Aleppo and so on. But during the floods in the Somerset levels, Calsa Aid in the UK delivered something like 700,000 tonnes of sand. And they worked alongside the Environment Agency. But increasingly, we are using digital to try and connect where people are with where there are problems. So this is a website called Flood Volunteers, but easily I could give you other examples such as, remember the riots in London and the riot cleanup immediately after London and so on. So there are lots of examples of how digital is augmenting what we do. But this stuff isn't without problems for us, okay? I'd suggest another big challenge for us is that digital is putting into the hands of people tools that mean that voluntary organisations might not be as relevant as they used to be. And indeed, one of the big challenges for larger organisations is how can you be nimble? How can you respond to the issues that people on the ground spot when they've got fantastic tools that enable them to do things by themselves? So this is the front cover of a book called Here Comes Everybody by an author called Clay Shirky. And his rather famous tagline is, organising without organisations is becoming ridiculously easy. So that's all fine. You, of course, have to make sure that your organisation gets it, and that's probably not typical of quite a few board members of organisations that we see. We need to rethink our strategy if hoping the internet will go away. And this is a photograph from one of NCVO's members on a site visit. You might notice there is a spoon coming out of the back of the router. I say this because I have a challenge for foundations, where I worry that sometimes I just think we're drinking the Kool-Aid a bit too frequently about all these whizzy ideas about what we want to do with web, such as, Internet of Things type projects where the floor tiles are digitally enabled so you can do your impact measurement and so on. We haven't got the basics right yet as a sector. And equally, in terms of the communities that we work with, when there are well-known issues around collectivism and the extent to which these new pro-social behaviours that people are exhibiting, the extent to which they're making a difference in the way that some of those older behaviours did. So if we look at volunteering, for example, we know that the way that people are getting involved is shifting from what you might call more like a labour force model where people are giving days or weeks at a time to instead more of a micro-volunteering model where people are giving very, very small chunks of time instead. We've got to think about how we use digital to connect these much more episodic, less brand loyal ways of getting involved together. I think I've got 1 more minute, if that's okay, according to my timer. Yeah? The other thing that I fret about at NCVO all the time, and this is where we're sort of almost coming on to sort of challenges for the sector, is the extent to which I think we need to be a little bit more critical of digital in terms of whether or not it is helping us to deal with one of our other roles, which is connecting people together. And that's not just connecting people together who are of the same background, what the sociologists call bonding social capital, but the extent to which technology helps us bridge between different communities and connect people who are different. I really fret at the moment about this idea of the filter bubble and this idea that technology is actually just taking us down a road where the only things that we read are the things that technology and algorithms think that we will agree with. Okay? So I think a key challenge for us going forward as grassroots organisations in particular is how do we build those spaces again, those spaces in civil society where people come together and they discuss the common good in a civilised fashion. I think we're losing those spaces. I can't switch my timer off. That shows how technology enabled I am, doesn't it? Someone just use the hell and do something. 7285 if you need a number. Is that being recorded?
For a fee, we might consider editing that out, but we'll negotiate.
Just the last few things that I wanted to say in terms of challenges and voluntary organisations in general and grassroots organisations in particular. I worry that we assume that everybody thinks that we are on the side of the angels and that everybody thinks that we are a force for common good. And it is my sense at the moment that we live in troubling times where not everybody thinks that voluntary organisations are a force for common good. We're living in what you might call an era of culture wars, where if you look at, say, polling from Lord Ashcroft, where actually people think that forces of openness in our society, feminism, multiculturalism, the internet and so on, broadly speaking, there's quite a large proportion of the population that think those things are bad things. And charities and voluntary organisations are sort of getting caught up in that. So we shouldn't assume, as this chart shows, for example, that people are willing to share their data with us because they think that we might not use that for purposes that are ultimately in their interests. So my final couple of slides are, if we're thinking about tech for social good, my challenge to you is, how does tech for social good work here? Okay, this is Clacton, I believe, one of the 10 most deprived boroughs in the country. I worry sometimes that when we have these discussions in places like this, we come up with whizzy ideas about tech for social good, and nobody ever asks, how will it work in Blackburn? How will it work in Clacton? How will it work in Bradford? Rather than just, how will it work in a coffee shop in North London? And my final challenge to you, and this is where we need tech to help us. When we see all this stuff that people are challenging charities and voluntary organisations about, such as how much are you spending on your admin costs, why are you paying staff, all that sort of stuff, the reason that they're asking all those questions is because they can't find out what they really want to know. And what they really want to know is, what's the difference that you are making? Because they can't find out what's the difference that you are making, they ask proxies instead. They ask about chief exec pay because it's the only thing that they can find that they think might be an indicator of, are you making a difference? So, final challenge to you is, if we're going to meet the needs of that post-Brexit Britain, how can we use technology to demonstrate to people, whether it's through data or stories, how do we use technology to show that we're making a bigger impact? Thank you.
Thanks so much.